This is Find Your Magic, where we interview people who have found their gifts and the courage to live into them. I'm Tracy Feldstein, body and wellness engineer and owner of Hello Mellow Natural Skincare.
And I'm Jaime Gennaro, consultant and business coach. And each week we talk to entrepreneurs, artists, healers, musicians, and we find out what scares them the most and how they jumped anyway.
If you like what you see and hear, please hit like and subscribe and share us with your friends.
And in the comments, tell us what you're afraid of so that we can help. And then we'll help you even more when you come to the summit in person, January 7th through 9th in Ojai, California. The link to the information's all below.
See you soon. So Kimby, I know, introduce yourself. Tell us.
I don't know where to start.
You don't know where to start?
So hello, I'm Kimberly Samson, and Tracy is a good friend of mine. So I'm very pleased to be here today. And I wear a lot of hats in my life. One hat that I wear is as a coach for women in midlife, making a transformation between sort of midlife crisis and what do we do with the next chapter. And in that capacity, I have a podcast called The Midlife, and I have a program that I walk women through, about a 6 to 8 week program that really helps them uncover that voice inside that is screaming at you with all of the answers to listen up. And to create a life that you love in your second half, because we are just so full of life experience and we know so much and we don't trust ourselves to know what to do with the second half. And then the other hat that I wear professionally is when women get past that sort of midlife crisis that I truly believe is a universal experience, I can help them put all of their skills to work, whether they've got an existing business that they want to take to the next level, or they want to start something new. And I help create a strategy for them to do that. So, and beyond that, I'm a very happy mommy to 3 boys and married for 100 years. And those are the hats I wear.
So
amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. So, what we're talking about here is that moment where where you reinvent yourself kind of in the same way. And when you find that thing that feels magical to you, and where's that moment that, where you leap and you jump into it and you decide okay, this is it, I'm going to do it. And just wondering how that happened for you.
Yeah. It's so funny when you are saying that and asking that question, the word that pops into my head is trust. And I think it's like, at that moment, when do you trust yourself to go, oh no, I really do want to do this. I really am good at this. And I really can make something out of this. And I think that for so long, we don't trust ourselves. We don't listen to that inner voice. And I think that that's the moment where you just know that you're on the right path, but also to trust that moment when you go, oh, you know what, the path is going to change here too. So yeah. I think that's where you find your magic, is in your trust of yourself and your abilities.
So what was that moment like for you? Like, what was that jumping off moment? What came into your head that you were like, oh, I need to trust that? Like, what was the message that you had heard before, but had ignored until you jumped into this?
I think for me, it was, I had accepted the status quo, and the status quo was not fun or fulfilling. And fun, I mean, I think that's a really important word too. And I just accepted that, oh, I guess this is just the way life goes. And that moment where I started to let like a fire burn inside again and say, well, that actually feels fun. And that actually feels like some way that I want to spend my day. And then to be on a quest for learning and to trust myself that I could still learn new things, that I could still build on what I already had in past careers and all of my life experience, and then apply that and be willing to learn and trust myself that I could be interested in something, know nothing about it, but that I could become an expert in it. And so I think, again, it's that trust. And for me, it was that moment of loving learning again. And all the things that I could do with what I was learning.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I love the metaphor too of like the fire, and that, because that's the thing that I think we all forget when we're in that status quo life is like, oh, I used to have this fire like when I was younger, and then it just has been dampened for so long. I even forgot
Yeah.
there was a fire to light. And it's funny too, because I just decided to teach like a really quick 4-week course for people, and it's called Finding Inspiration Fueled Work for Tired Moms.
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing is like when you're in, this midlife moment and you're like, but I'm too freaking tired to even like start this journey or to think I could learn anything more or to add anything else into my day or my life because I'm too tired.
Well, and I think isn't the message too that the exhaustion goes away when you're excited about something?
Yes. That's the fire. Yes.
That's the crazy thing is that I am more busy now and my time is more packed, but I have more energy. And so I think women especially need to understand that the exhaustion goes away when you feed the magic, when you feed the energy.
Yeah, it refuels you, right? Like it's not like you're just expending, you're
Right.
getting back from the magic because it fuels you, right? It feeds you. It's so great.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and that's something I talk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that energy flow, especially as women, like there's so much output. And so one of the things that I encourage women to do is to just stop for a moment, look at all the things you're doing, and then ask yourself, which of these activities is actually returning more energy than I'm giving it? So even something that takes a lot of energy, like, what you guys are doing here today, like this takes a lot of energy to find people, schedule people, you're in crazy different time zones. And, that to some people would seem like so overwhelming, but, you're on it because it's exciting to have conversations and to learn new things. And so the energy that returns to you is so much more valuable than the ante, right? Like that you just have to put in to begin with, you're going to get more out of it.
Yeah. What's fun too, I think, is talking to everyone and getting inspired by everyone and their magic and watching how, even like when we talked to Deep, it was like, he does this thing after his 60-hour-a-day week every single day because it fuels him. And it's like, oh my gosh, right? When you hear it, it's like, how do you do that? But yet it's that thing. It's that like, no, this one's for me. This one refuels me so I can do all those other things and be stoked about it and feel good inside me. So I think it's so interesting. The other thing that we talk about is like, what are those things that are the human things that stopped you before that magical moment where you did trust, and what got in the way, and what were the obstacles that show up, kind of humanizing like that moment where people choose either to trust or to not. And so it's kind of fun to bring light to that dark part that's like, oof. So just if you feel comfortable sharing like what some of that was for you.
Yeah. Well, I think, one, I had an amazing thought that just left my head.
Which also happens to us in this moment in life.
Especially before 7 a.m. in the morning.
Yes.
I mean, seriously, Tracy, wait, tell me again ask me again what your question is. I'm so sorry.
What
and you don't even have to edit this out because if that isn't human, I don't know what it is.
It's true.
Right. Exactly. It's perfect. What were the moments that held you back from the trust, or that came before that, like the doubts, the things that got in your way?
Yeah, I think it's the stories we tell ourselves, right? That, and like even Jaime with this program that she's running for tired moms, is that the story that you tell yourself that I'm just too tired. Right. And so all those obstacles that you create and all the reasons why it can't happen or it won't work and why you accept where you are. And, and also I think, and some things that I think Jaime was kind of touching on too, is like that sort of like regret. Where did that fire go? And that sort of sadness and mourning for something that was or should have been. And you just get stuck instead of going, well, no, I can find that again. And being motivated to say, she's still in there and I'm going to find her and I'm going to let her free again. So I think it's just, stop telling yourself that those stories or accepting what other people, what?
I said, you're such a coach. You use everyone else's foot. I want to say like, but what about for you?
Oh.
You're like, anyway,
No, I think
people.
I think I was mourning, what I thought I was going to, light the world on fire. Right. And then, you sort of mourn, or I was angry at myself that I hadn't done more or experienced more. And then instead of, and also, I mean, I think for me, it was one, acknowledging all the amazing good in my life instead of like focusing on negative or things that I was angry at myself about. And so acknowledging all that good and then using that as a springboard to jump off and say, wow, I've got this amazing foundation, and it ain't over. So what else can I create? What else can I do? And how exciting that it's going to be totally different than anything I could have ever predicted.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the key, because a lot of people who I work with too are like, oh, what does it mean to find my purpose? And then they put so much pressure on that process that they can't see that it might be something really simple. Like, oh, why don't you just make a video, or why don't you just send one email and see where it gets you, right? They're just so focused on like, no, but it has to be this perfectly manicured thing that I've been spending my whole life trying to find. It's the most important moment in my life. And then it's like, oh, wait, but it might actually just be taking a class. And then that takes you to step one of the next path in your journey, or it might be just having one conversation. So it's not putting all this pressure on like what it is. You find it as you take each small step, but it's not what you think it's going to be, right? It's not like, oh, in my 20s, I wanted to be a rock star, and like now I'm not a rock star. And so I'm like a POS, and like, what's wrong with me? I should have been a rock star. And it's like, well, there might be like a little step that you just haven't taken yet, and just take all the pressure off of it. Cause it's just,
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I have a podcast episode, and I talk about this all the time, is don't find your purpose, find your purposefulness. Cause I think it's like, I actually think it's kind of narcissistic and that's just human nature, right? That I am put on this earth for something, and I have to find what that something is. Like, no. I mean, some people have like really driving callings, and I'm very jealous of those people. Like, that's awesome. Good for you. But I think for most of us, like normal humans, it's just about where can you put your energy to make other people and your life a better place. And that's just being purposeful in what you're doing and being flexible, like you're saying, to just, take that one class and see where it leads you. And also to be, and to not be so judgmental. Like, you might think, I definitely want to do this. And then you look more into it and you're like, I really don't want to do that, but I said I was going to do that, so I have to do that. No, you're allowed to change your mind.
Yeah.
Just be purposeful, just have action, just be doing something that is entertaining you in the moment, and give yourself up to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're all living proof of, once you step into opening yourself up to trying something new, things keep opening up. And if you just stay open and, don't get in your own way and be like, okay, I'm just going to try. And every time I'm pushed in a direction, or I feel, motivated to try something else out, try it. You don't know. Right. And we're constantly like, we don't know. Like, even this, we were like, I don't know, let's try it. And then we're like, oh, it feels so good. It's so much fun. Let's keep doing it. What else? Right. And so that's that fun of like, you never know. Right. We keep growing. We keep shifting.
It's so funny, Tracy, like as you're talking, I'm just thinking about like the moment that you and I had on the beach too. And also it's really good to have friends and colleagues that will hold a mirror up and go, no, you need to hang a left here. So, and just to be open, like just to not be so rigid about what you think the plan is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the story on the beach? You guys have to tell a shortened version of the story on the beach.
Oh, no, just that, I am somebody who gets very fixated. It's funny because I definitely don't follow my own advice. Imagine where I'd be if I did. Just kidding. I get like very rigid in my plans, and I've set a goal and I'm like, I'm going to march towards that goal. And sometimes you just need a great friend like Tracy to just go, I see other things for you. And I want you just open your eyes, just see if there's other things for you. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. What was that moment like for you, Tracy? What did you see in Kimby?
I love the magical part, and I love watching people like just in it when you can tell that they're like, they're telling you about something and you're like, oh yeah, well, whatever that is, like, and that's when I know someone's in their passion and they're in their magic. And Kimby was talking about parts of her business, like, and then there's these other parts of and I was like, any chance you might want to do that part more than that part? And she's like, nope. I was like, you might want to just look at it. And so, and so to blossom in that way of like, I think you might be missing that this is like your jam and this is really where you're happy. And why not follow that? Because everyone needs that, right? Who doesn't want the part where you're like, juicy? That's what everyone wants, like, and including you, right? It's like including feeling that experience of like, ooh, what does it feel like in my body? And that's sort of what I do, right? So it's like, okay, feel this one. What do you want to add more to your life?
And I think Tracy brings up like such an important part too, is you can't do this by yourself. This life you cannot do by yourself.
Yeah.
And so you need coaches and you need friends and you need colleagues and you need mentors and you need, your family, all of that. Otherwise, I mean, because if you just sit in your head and spin, like you miss so much.
Yeah. I think that, that's like running your own business in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's no path of running your own business that doesn't involve personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many, it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have to be a coach for your business. You could be running some business that has nothing to do with like servicing people. You could have some random, well, not random, but like a product company or like computer products or software. But if you manage people or you manage, marketing funnels, or you have to get your business from point A to point B, and you have to figure out what part of the business you're going to own or delegate or let go of, like, that's all growth on every level, right? Like, okay, how does your ego let go of certain tasks? How does your, sort of personal, the way you deal with people, the way you talk to people, how does that affect your team? How do you recruit certain people to be on your team? What's the, it's all of it. And if you're just doing it completely by yourself, it adds tenfold the difficulty of the growth, because you might not even recognize there's a personal growth aspect. And if you don't recognize it, then you sort of push it down and ignore it. And then you don't get to open yourself up to all the magical things that can happen when you start to pivot and change and move towards things that you really enjoy. Because it sounds like too, from your beach conversation, that maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but
Please do.
From your old life, there was a pattern, right? There's a pattern in your old life of like, set a goal, hit the goal. Society gives me a checkbox and a pat on the back. Okay, move to the next one. And so you start to get into that pattern again with your own business. Like, okay, what's my goal? What's my checkbox? What's my pat on the back? But for you now, it's different. You have to like change those patterns of goal setting.
Yeah. And Jamie, I think you used such an important word too, is ego. And I think even all of us that would say, well, I'm not like, I don't have it. I would never say this about myself, but some people like, I don't have an ego. I'm not, but it does get in the way when you don't open yourself up to collaboration and to hear what other people have to say and to look for those growth opportunities, because we do get so entrenched in those patterns. And I do think that is our ego. And I think part of it is just self-preservation too, and self-protection. Yeah. And that, if I try, I might fail. I might miss that goal. But what else will happen when you do? What other opportunities arise? Yeah. Like, don't fear it, welcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think it's interesting what you said about the mirrors, right? Having the people, and what's true is, that moment on the beach you've had with me, Jamie's had with me, I've had with Jamie, like we've all done it where we were like, oh, can you see this part? And it's like, oh no, I couldn't see that part. And like, we can only see so much of ourselves, and it's so helpful to be in a place where you feel safe and trusting of someone or a group, or, just like you're saying, to keep growing and allowing people to see all the parts of you and be welcoming that, which is, like you said, it can be ego scary. It can be just, something you're used to. And it may take some time to wrap your brain around, but it's so great. And I know that I've had so much growth with, everyone and you guys that hold me in a certain way also, and can see me in a way that I don't see me, which is amazing to have people to be able to say like, hey, why don't you put that one down? Why don't you do that? And it's like, oh, that felt good. I didn't realize I could do that,
Yeah. Well, and also we're so like defensive too. Again, I think out of self-preservation, and you just have to sit with it for a moment. You have to trust the people around you. I mean, that's magic when you have people around you that, even if it doesn't sound right at first, that they really have your best interests at heart. And so you better just maybe consider it a little extra.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's interesting because I think like this idea of ego plays into so many things, because it's also like the fear of making mistakes, like this whole perfectionism piece too, which is, the defensiveness comes from that too. And it is self-preservation. But I think it's interesting when you stop trying to be perfect. And even as a business owner, right, if you do have a team and you just own your mistakes, and if you don't try to sweep them under the rug, if you're like, oh yeah, that's my bad, I have no idea what I'm doing, does someone want to step in and help me?
Right. How
that
can we
type
do
of
better?
leadership is so much more effective than like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, oh, and trying to play this game of like, oh, I've got it all under control. Like, that doesn't help anyone. Like, none of us have it under control. There are certain parts that we're better at than others, but we're all making it up as we go along every day. And that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
It's like the spontaneity of it.
And I think like a really powerful phrase is, I don't know. Like, I think it's okay not to know, and not to like hold yourself out and pretend to everybody that you do know.
Yeah.
I think, it's okay to say, I don't know, but we can figure it out.
Right.
Or that surprised me that went that way.
Right. The start of the conversation where you never know where all these other people around you might have some influence or some interesting advice, right? And you limit yourself by thinking it's all on me, I need to know it all, right? It's like, well, you only know what you know. And by opening up to, I don't know what you got, then you have a world of let's see,
Yeah. And again, back to like, your growth, like you limit your growth if you decide that you already know it all.
Right.
And not like listen for those other people in the room that might know a little bit more than you do.
Yeah, exactly. So Kimby, in your business now, because it sounds like you might be in a moment where you're kind of like shifting from one thing to the other. What scares you the most right now? What is your big fear of like, if I come out like this might happen, I'm scared of that. Like what's happening with you right now?
It's like, it's all the investment already, like the time and investment of like sunk cost, of what I had it all figured out. I had the exact plan. I've achieved that plan. It's good, but I'm not done. And so I think that too, and again, I think it kind of might go back to ego also, just like, but I thought that was going to be everything. I thought that was going to be at 100% of everything that I wanted and needed to give the world. And then you're like, that might just be 20%. That was a lot of time and effort. And that might just be a piece of the pie. I didn't know I was baking something else.
Right.
So, yeah. So that transition is I think difficult for everybody, where you're changing the plan, especially because back to and I just think that we're pre-programmed this way a lot as women, is like checking the boxes and following the plan and following through on what you were going to say. And we're not really taught flexibility. It's like somebody has to hold the rule book. And I think a lot of times that falls on women to hold the rule book. And so, but what if you want to break the rules or change the rules? And why is it even breaking the rules? Maybe it's just changing the rules. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a negative thing.
Yeah. Well, and who made the rules? That's what I always like to ask too. I have an idea of who made the rules, and I'm not sure I like those rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what if it's not an end point? What if it's just a journey, right? And what if, right, it's like that end point thing, like, oh, and I'm going to get here, I think always messes us up, right? Because when you get there, it's never what you think it's going to be. And you always, so there's the moment where like all the dark stuff comes up, right? You're disappointed. It feels like failure. It doesn't feel like what you thought it was going to feel like. And it's like, what if it's just a checkbox and you're like, got here, keep going, like, what did I learn? Because like when I watched your process of where you've come and how much you've learned and grown, and like, if you just like sat for a month and someone brought you water, like you could not get up just thinking about all the things that you have learned and grown and showed yourself, and the wealth of knowledge and experience that you've given yourself by this checkbox amazing thing that you've developed.
Well, thank you. And I think we also need to just like disconnect ourselves from the result, like that there even is a result. And so, it's so cliche to say now, but to live in the moment, but that is really where the fun and the magic is. It's just like, what is happening at this moment rather than where is this moment going to lead me? Because in that empty space, we like lose so much energy thinking instead of just doing what's now and being like more curious and more excited about the uncertainty. Because if I did it again, I'm on this new, or tangent, or I don't know, is it complementary path, whatever it is, like Tracy's saying, if now I think like, well, this is it, wherever that is, I'm going to get there and go, yeah, okay, where else can we go? Always.
Yes.
So
it kind of reminds me of your podcast this week, which I just loved, but I'm going to say the word wrong on the soup. What is it called?
Oh, the cassoulet. I don't even know if I say it right. Yeah.
Right. So the story is that like, it's a never ending soup, right? You just keep adding to it and it keeps, and her favorite place where she used to go with her grandparents was like 16,000 days or something like that they had been, and they marked it every day. And like, it's just a never ending soup, and how much better it gets and richer it gets because they just keep adding to the same thing, and you take from it and you add and it keeps developing and changing. And I was like, since I heard it, I'm like,
I love that.
Soup. It's just like this, I'm finding the soup and everything. So,
and also there's less dishes, which is always a good thing.
Right? You never have to clean that pot.
You never have to clean the pot. But maybe that's true too. Like, don't clean your pot.
Like really pivoting from one thing to another. So for instance, I have a friend who I hope is listening, because I'm really trying to encourage her to like just jump off the cliff. It's time. But she's been working for a really large corporation at a very high level, and she wants to start her own business doing basically like interior design. And it feels like a huge leap. It feels really different, but she's essentially run a whole entire department. So she can run a business. She brings that to the table. She's also like been at the head of building out retail spaces. It's not a big leap from like a corporate retail space to interior design for someone's house. Same skill set, right? Plus she's incredibly personable, is amazing with her team. She'll be fantastic with clients. It's like, it's all part of, I love that. Like, don't clean the pot. Like all of those skills are really relevant. But what people do is they're like, oh, but I've never done that before. So let me go take a class. Let me enroll and like get a master's degree in X. And
right?
like,
you're like, no, you're already doing it.
I'm all for classes. Like sometimes it does help you kind of get over the hump, but don't use that as the excuse to not do it. Like your pot is full. It's full of all these skills that are completely transferable. You just have to take step one and just test it out and see. And maybe it won't be the end point. Maybe you're going to transition from interior design to like some other level of design. but at least just like take that first stepping stone. Don't go get a master's degree. That's just going to put you backwards in time and like money. And you're not going to actually be experimenting with your skill. You're just going to be like thinking you don't have a skill. And then in your own other mind spin,
Isn't that so something that women do too? Because, well, I'm not valuable if I don't have the letters to prove to you that I can do this. Because I don't know who wrote that rule. That's a dumb rule, because there's this thing called the internet where you can learn anything for just about free, and you don't have to go get I mean, there's some things where you have to have licensure, of course, but this person, this friend of yours, probably could teach the master's degree with all of her life experience. And so like, why get hung up on the letters?
100%.
That's what we have to, that we choose to use that to validate ourselves instead of just, going for it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and also knowing that they've been cooking the cassoulet for, right. Like, it's like, she has to know, like, you've been cooking this forever. Like, you have, all of that is worth something, and it's actually worth more than going to take a class. You have life experience. And so that's that like self-confidence piece, right? Where you just tell yourself, I'm going to trust, right? Like the beginning of our conversation, there's that moment of just trust and jump and step into it. And, even last week with Reese, he was like, I took a day and I started doing it. And then I added another day and I started to do, and like you start to build up your trust in yourself and your confidence. And then you just decide, I got it. I got my own back no matter what happens.
Yeah. I had a student that spent a year taking classes in a discipline that she was really interested in. And it did pan out that she really did want to do this. And I was like, okay, now go get hired. Now go find somebody to pay you to do it. And the analogy I gave her was, I don't know if you guys ski, but like when you go on a more advanced run, you kind of glide around the top and you kind of like try to find your path down. Like, where are you going to drop in? And I kept saying to her, because she was a skier too, I was like, drop in, stop just like gliding along the top, looking for your path, just drop in. By the way, you might make a mistake and you might have to cut over to the left a little bit, but drop in already. And so this idea of just sort of like pacing back and forth, and, your poor friend, client, Jaime, that's thinking about this transition, spending so much time and energy thinking, just do it. Just take a chance. And it might work, it might not, but oh well, find out.
Exactly.
Right. And like, I'm saying like Reese Leslie, it was like, and maybe you need to keep your job for right now, and you need to pay for your family, and like your bills and whatnot. But so take one project, just do one project on the side and just let yourself experience it, feel it, live into it, see what it feels like. Yeah, maybe you'll be working even harder. But again, back to what we were saying, like that may feed you so much, it won't matter. And you'll be so excited, or you won't, and you'll gather that information. Great.
Yeah. No risk. Yeah.
No, it's all good, right? It's a gathering information adventure.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, I think you're so good at that too, that sort of 30,000 foot view of, so how about a happy medium? How about a little bit of everything? Right. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's that black and white thinking that gets us into a lot of trouble of like, oh, I have to do this. Well, you were talking about it too, Kimby, of like, I have to do this. I've set this goal. This is the thing that I'm doing, or this feels really different. It's like, well, no, we're allowed to sway in between. We're allowed to try this for a day, or go over here for a minute, or have this conversation that might feel like a stretch. There is no black and white. It's all just like a mishmash. I guess it's gray.
It's so funny. And
it's all gray area.
In another example of never following my own best advice, I actually have an entire podcast episode called The Gray Area.
Oh my God. See, look at that. We're just all on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that for me also is obviously a huge place of growth, and for more growth is just, there's always a middle ground. There's always a middle ground.
Yeah. I think the thing I hear that maybe we haven't brought to light is, through all this, if you're worried about what it looks like on the outside, which we all do, right? What it's going to look like if I do that, or what if I've never done this before. What are people going to say about me doing this? Or what are people going to say that I feel like I can do this? Or, the judgment, the outside stories that we make up about what it's going to look like, and how people are going to think we're crazy or judge us or whatnot, those can be such big squashers of our dreams and moving forward. And I sort of, I just bring that to light and see how you guys feel about that too. But
it's so funny, like not knowing Jamie's friend, obviously not knowing the full story, but that was the one thing I thought of. I thought, because she's got this big corporate job. And I was thinking, I wonder if she's afraid to tell people she's just an interior designer. Like what, right? Because we weirdly take so much value. And I certainly did in my, old career, like that I was my job and that made me important. That's not what makes me important. The fact that I got lunches made and breakfast on the table before we sat down this morning, that makes me important.
Totally.
Yeah, but those stories, and in fact, it's funny because in this transition, like I've got a new company name and I've got a new slogan and all this stuff. And I shared it with a friend of mine and he said to me, he goes, but you're not really an agency. You're like not really going to be an agency. And I was like, well, who says that? Why do you say that? You don't know what my plans are. You don't know what my skills are. He doesn't get to hear about any of my future plans.
Well, see, that's an important realization too, as we like build this community around us. You don't always have to just build a community of people who are going to tell you what you want to hear. You need some like truth tellers, which we've all identified Tracy as our truth teller, but people who
in the
believe
nicest
in
way
you,
too.
in
like
the nicest
how about
way.
that skill?
So she does it from a way that like she believes in you and you see that belief from her and it makes you want to pivot to the right or left because you're like, oh, you see that in me. Nobody else sees that in me. And I think when you build this support network around yourself, you need those people who see you and encourage it. And the people who are squashing your dreams, like can take us to the side. Like we don't have to cut them out of our lives, but we don't have to share our dreams and aspirations with them because we don't need them to squash it. We do that enough of that ourselves. Like we don't need people from the outside telling us what we can't do. So that's an important piece too.
Yeah. And, and I think one of the things I'm most proud of that I do for people is I do see the greatness that they can achieve. Like, maybe to a little bit to their detriment because they'll be like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, oh, that sounds fabulous. But how about if you do that times 100? Because I can see it at this level. And I think people get scared by the fact that they really do have that capacity and capability and they just can't see it in themselves. And I think that's a hard leap.
Yeah. Well, that's like the whole fear of success thing, right? That is a weird thing to say, like, oh, I think I'm afraid of what it could be. But I think it's also because we tie this idea of like, that sounds tiring. If we grow it 100 times, it sounds like it sounds exhausting. Like, I don't know if I want that, but also I'm afraid of that because I don't know what that means for me and how that's going to change my life. It's so comfortable over here under my soft blanket.
Yeah.
And I would jump into that's when I'm usually like, okay, let's go back to the story behind that story. And what's the original belief from way back, right? That shows up there that limits you, right? And so when we each find our limiting story and that really, all of a sudden you're like, oh, geez, that's everywhere. that sort of, helps with limiting my beliefs in every way, that if I can find that story, then I can start to stretch that.
Well, gosh, and Tracy, I think it just goes back to what you were saying is that like opinion of others that we adopt as opinion of ourselves. Yeah. Well, nobody would think that I could actually build something that big. So I must not be able to, instead of relying on people like, you guys that are like, no, you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the practice of living in there, right? And that's what the fun of the summit is, and why we created that. It's like, oh, let's all be in a space where when you walk out of this, that you're going to be able to hold your own and speak from that and live from that and not be afraid of what it looks like or what it feels like take ownership of your magic and then choose everything from that space, right? And so exciting.
How sad is it too? Because we've all experienced those like bursts of energy where you're with people that really feed you, or you have this idea and you're like so excited about it. And then you allow yourself to retreat back to that other space that says no. why do we choose not to live in that magic? Why do we choose that feels better? Why aren't we doing the things that feel good all the time? Why do we allow ourselves to go back to those like just ingrained patterns that don't feel good?
Yeah, the familiar. Unfortunately, you gotta really work and reprogram your beliefs, and those old beliefs just you just get lazy and you go right back into them. And as soon as something feels uncomfortable, we start that like, oh yeah, that's because I'm this guy, right? And it's like, no, you're not. That's just an old story. Right. But you're so used to it. I always say, like, it's like you've been listening to the same record over and over and over again, and you didn't realize there's a billion other ones you could put on. You could turn that one over, you could pick a new one, you could break it, like, but you just, there's sort of an ease in, I already know this one, I know how it goes, I know the words. It's gonna be a lot of work to decide which one of these I want, and then I gotta learn the words, and I gotta learn how to play all me, right? It's like, it's a lot more work, but actually you may put one on and be like, I love this song. I'm willing to learn,
Yeah. Well, and we train ourselves to believe that like the negative voice or the like telling ourselves it's not going to work out is more realistic than the idea that like, oh, but maybe actually it could be effing amazing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel realistic. This feels like, oh, we're grounding ourselves. We're like getting ourselves set up with the right level of expectations. This is real life. And it's like, no, they're both not real life. This is not real life either. Like saying it's not going to work out is also just projecting something into the future, is just projecting something negative into the future. And why? But it's just, it's so habitual. There's actually, this perfectly reminds me, can be of a conversation Tracy and I had when we were preparing the curriculum for the summit. And she was like, let's get people into their happy place. Let's get them like living into the magic. Let's get them centered in that place. And then all of a sudden, like I was like asking questions that took her out of the happy place and took her to the place of like, let's dig in and figure out why there are negative thoughts. And she's like, why are you doing that? We just want to keep them in there. Don't take them out and like walk them around and ask them why they're not in there. Just get them in there. Let's just like keep them in there. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing that. Why am I doing that? I want them to stay in there. But it just, even for me, like from the outside, I was like, no, but we have to solve all the problems and then they can go into the happy place.
Right.
No.
I'm like, if they go to the happy place, they'll solve all their problems.
Tracy, it's so true. It's so true.
It's so true, but it's not the common, right? And so it's not what you see out there. And so it's a little scary. I mean, imagine growing up thinking that was the truth, right? It's like everyone else is looking at you like, well, that's ridiculous, right? Come over here, be miserable with the rest of us. And I'm like, okay, and really depressed because it's like, well, I think there's another option. And they're like, sit down. There isn't, and I'm like, oh. I'm really uncomfortable here with all you thinking this way though, so it's so wonderful to be able to live in a place and with people that it's like, no, let's just do this. And allow myself 100%. To do that too.
I mean, and so funny, Tracy, because you make me live in my happy place for sure. And Jaime, when you say like, maybe it will work out, what does that even mean? Work out? Like that's what we decide what the results are before anything even happens.
Yes.
And so like what is working out? I mean, I think really it worked out if you had a great day, you had a great hour, you are proud of something you accomplished today. You had some fun, you grew a little, you learned something new, you made somebody else's day better. Like, isn't that working out?
Oh my God, I love all of that. I was just doing an exercise with my class that was that this week. It's like, just at the end of your day, have a practice to lean into the wins, to the good stuff and the little bit of growth. And if you didn't, look at your day and then circle the things that you could have leaned into and lean into tomorrow. How are they going to make you just this much each day?
Yeah.
Let's just look for that much growth, that much expansion every day. And let's just live over there. And if we're looking for that, we're going to keep growing that.
Oh, I love
yes.
that.
100%. 100%.
Well, on that note, this is one of my wins today. I love this conversation so much. Oh my gosh, Kimby, it's been so great to meet you. I can't wait to spend more time with you.
I know, which I'm going to get to very soon. I mean, now I was always excited, but now I get to just go to my happy place for, what is it, 2 or 3 days?
Yep.
I'm there.
So good.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, ladies, for having me. This was really fun. A great way to start my Monday, because now I'm really energized. So very excited.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. Well, we'll
Thanks,
keep the
Kimby.
conversation going. We all need a story to sort of hold on to and like know the specifics of that story. And that's been a tough journey for me, but I think it was interesting. I think it's like a coachy thing that we do.
Yeah. And I think even beyond a coachy thing, it's a protection thing, and I think there's so many layers to it. I think, the vulnerability part. And then there's also, like we were talking about, the ego and the judgment of, I'm going to talk from my experience, right? Like, this is who I am. This is how it worked for me. This is how it's working for me, right? And like, am I allowed to talk about myself that way? Am I allowed to stand in the place where this is my experience and it's valid and it matters? And what does it look like? Does it look like I'm full of myself? Am I being humble? And it's like, there's a lot of mind games that we play about just speaking from our experience. And is that enough? Am I someone that gets to share my experience, and does it matter?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from that professional side too, that we were talking about, I think sometimes, and maybe it's for coaches and also for other people, like the friend that I was talking about in the, in the conversation, there's also this outside perspective of, oh, if I talk about my vulnerabilities, if I talk about where I've come from and what's been difficult for me or what my obstacles have been, will people trust that I have my shit together, essentially? Right. Or will they be like, oh no, well, you're broken, and so obviously you won't be able to help me? I think that's also a piece of where we sit, as a healer or as a coach or as somebody who's helping other people with their businesses. It's always like, well, what about yours? Well, what about your stuff? Did you work it all out? Are you done? You done with that work? Yeah. And of course, we're never done with that work, but it's hard for us as the people in the position to be helping people that like, well, no, it's ongoing. There's no endpoint. We're not getting you to an endpoint. We're just making your day better, hopefully.
Right. Believing in yourself. I think it's interesting. I think of the people that I can hear their teachings and their sharing, and they are humble, right? They are like, when I think of Brene Brown, like she's telling you like, this is my research and this is how it works. And she's like, I mean, I don't know how to do it. I'm working my ass off trying to do, and she's like, I suck at this. Okay, let's talk about this one. This one's really hard for me. Right. And it's like, oh, right. So to me, it's like, it makes it more authentic, where I'm not sharing like, well, this is how you should do it. It's like, well, we're all working on doing this. This is where I do it well. This is where I don't do it well. How about you? Right. And that makes it like easier to match that and be like, oh, okay. Yeah, I do this well. I don't do that well. Right. But you don't just walk into a conversation being like, hi, so this isn't what I do. I don't do this well. It's not normal for people to start there. Right. Yeah. So the more you can bring that in. And so I like to think of the people that are sharing from that space of authenticity of like, yeah, I don't got it all together. There's parts I have that, but everything is open for growth.
Yeah. No, I like that too. And it's actually making me think about parenting too. We were talking a lot about people who own businesses in our conversation with Kimby, but also I think parenting is really similar. It's like being able to show up and say, I don't know the answer. Just because I'm your mom doesn't mean I have all the answers, but we can find it together. Or maybe you have the answer. Maybe you have an idea about this. And I think it's also just, I don't know. I don't know if it's effective because I haven't seen I haven't seen my kids be adults and see what, dramas they have from their childhood. But that's how I like to approach parenting too, because it's like, oh, you made a mistake or you handled this situation like that. Well, guess what? I handle situations and make mistakes all the time. And like, I'm not perfect. There are things I'm working on. There are things I don't do the way I want to do them, but it's ongoing. It's a process. It takes time. It takes effort. But I'm doing it too, even as old as I am. Right.
Yeah. I love that for parenting. And as I hear it, I just love that for the world. I think that makes better friendships. I think it makes better workers, in the workplace. It makes better bosses. I feel like that being able to be authentic and vulnerable and show up with, hey, me too. And, can we talk about it? Can we have a conversation? And the fact that that's where you're coming from, to me, that's the gift of everything.
Yeah.
So the more I can see that anywhere, I applaud it, and it warms my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And so today's conversation with Kimby was amazing. And even if only one person watches it, which is pretty typical for my YouTube channel, I just loved connecting with her. So she is now like a part of the tribe. I'm so happy she's a part of it. This is what this is about for us, is like making these connections with people and growing our community. So I love that. So I hope people get something out of it, but even if they don't, I got a tremendous amount out of it.
Me too. And I feel like people are going to find it when they're ready to find it and when they need it and when it feels supportive. And I hope it supports them in ways that we all support each other. And that's why we're doing it. Right. But yes, it's a total win to me. This is one of those things that completely fuels, like, I'm like Monday 7 and I'm happy as could be. Like, let's get this week rolling. Yeah. So
for sure. Yeah. Awesome. And it's about like fun, adding fun. And I think Kimby said that really well. Like, whatever fuels you, whatever feels fun, add that back into your life. Like, start adding more fun, inspiring things, and you'll start to feel more energetic. And then you start to take the steps that you need to kind of get to the place where you're being more fueled by that than by whatever else, right? Caffeine, let's say. Right?
Yeah. Ooh, that makes me feel like we have a new dare for us. I feel like we need some really fun music to end with so that people can like dance their way out of our after our call and get like a good minute of like having fun. That's going to be our dare.
Okay. I love that. Yes. Great. Okay, perfect.
So you have your own little moment of fun.
It's on.
Okay.
Dare received.
Yay. Wonderful. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Till next time, right?
Till next week. Okay. Right. Bye.
Bye. Hey there. This week we are talking to Kimberly Samson, and she is the owner and creator of the Midlife, helping women transition, right? Transition in midlife. And she has a podcast that's amazing. You need to listen to it. It's the Midlife. And she is funny and she's clever and she's smart. And
we had a great conversation.
Right? We had a great conversation. So much fun.
Take a listen.